Um, Hi, I'm Desiree. I'm Despot at the Third Element. And you are?
Spencer Creaghan. I'm composer on Real Estate.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
So
you.
could you tell us about your background? What drew you to a career in composing?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to work in film since I was young. Like I knew it was going to be either writing, directing, acting, and I've worked in all the fields. And then around age 15, I got really into a genre of heavy metal called symphonic metal, and that kind of led me back into the world of putting music into film and specifically um, narrative music. And even when I was working on my own movies, I was always very good about putting music in the film, but it was always the writing of the music. I was always top. I was always I'm told by everyone like your music is very narrative. Like it sounds like even without like words, like it's already I'm telling stories. And so I put these two loves together and realized that I'm pretty good at this job. And sort of just from age 15 onwards, decided let's just figure out how to make this work. I went to a university in Toronto, where the film program and the music program were in the same building, and that allowed me to meet filmmakers from day one and just begin working from the age of 19. And here we are now, 10 years later, just letting that fester and and stew and just let life do its thing.
I saw that you were nominated, or you worked on the Juno nominated Martyr by Cradle of Filth.
Yeah, it was it's not by Cradle of Filth, but it is by their a former keyboardist. She was in the band for about 8 years, and she teamed up with the former Evanescence songwriter Rocky Gray. And I've known Lindsay for about 12 years, and we've been working together for a very long time. And I've been writing her orchestral parts for about as long. And we just knew that it was the right fit on this album, and none of us expected a nomination. We just wanted to write a record that kind of sounded like old school goth rock, and we were all surprised that it gets nominated for a Juno.
So is the Juno is like the Grammy, or is it
like the Canadian Grammy? Yeah,
Canadian Grammy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about composing interests you versus the orchestral symphonic metal that you also do?
They're actually both one and the same, I find, because I tend to approach them from a very similar mindset, which is what's the story that we're trying to tell, that we want the audience or the listener to be taking away. Like I'm working with a metal band now, and all of the songs are unique in the sense that the one is like the brutal one is like the more poppy one, etc. But when we're entering into each piece, it's always my question for each one is what's the painting that we kind of want this to kind of look like, where if someone was listening, they would picture this like this world or like this atmosphere within it. And I do a very similar kind of thing when I'm working in films, where it's what's the images and these stories that we're not seeing, but are baked within the character's journey or history, or what's the concept that's floating within but needs something to like help it be brought out. And I find both of those to be an almost, it's like one is the heads and one is the tails of the same coin, and I've been really fortunate that they tend to parallel and and coexist, where I'll take lessons learned in film and bring it over to bands, and vice versa. Even the music from Real Estate is quite heavily inspired by my work working on Martyr or any of these other bands.
Actually, I was going to ask you about Surreal Estate in terms of what you draw, the inspiration that you draw from when you're composing for the different episodes.
It's I've been talking the last little bit about how there seems to be the general palette, and then each episode also has its own unique palette, and that was something that we discussed pretty early on, because each house has its own unique mythology and a ghost, and we knew pretty early on that we wouldn't be able to just keep the same musical palette working for every single episode, because every house is pretty unique in that regard. So we decided then pretty early that what if we had a series of motifs, kind of like Star Wars, or Game of Thrones, where every concept is basically represented. We have a family, failure, investigation, and each of these ideas will pop up in every single episode on a similar musical palette: piano, strings, Irish instruments. Then each episode will also have its own unique soundscape, inspired by the inspiration behind each of the houses. And so one of the houses, which happened last week, was all about sailors, and we thought, it could be really interesting. What if we used foghorns, ship bells, to kind of help us bring to life this sailor kind of world. Another episode that's coming down the line is all about time, and so that episode has reversed music, slowed down music. It has grandfather clocks. It has all these kind of different elements, and it's been really interesting working on this, because every episode is always how do we figure out, how do you make music that's frightening that you haven't done last week, because last week you did it this way. How do you do it again this week that makes it sound like it's part of the TV show, but isn't reusing the stuff that we did last time? That's that house and this is this house. And it's been pretty rewarding to figure that out week by week, and it's kind of interesting what you can do, where even you can take something as simple as a bathtub and try to figure out, how do you turn this into a musical instrument? How do you turn this into something that's frightening? And it works, and it sounds really creepy when you figure it out. So
I was going to say, in the pilot episode, so the Hellmouth House has a different vibe and type of terror in the music than the Poltergeist house.
Yes, absolutely. The Hellmouth House was very inspired by the scores to The Omen and The Exorcist. It's very old school Jerry Goldsmith, lots of choirs, and those are a blast. But then we get to episode 2, and there's a poltergeist, and the poltergeist is more witchy. It's almost like a Hansel and Gretel kind of story. And so we thought, what if that's what we leaned in onto? So I brought in medieval instruments to help us get a more Germanic medieval sound. And so every episode has something like that, where there's always what does this remind us of in the context of the history of horror? What does it remind us of in the context of where our characters are going, and how is it related to real world mythologies and folklores, and I'm a big nerd about that kind of stuff. So I was always trying to figure out how do we incorporate that into this music, and it's been a really exciting. It's been really exciting experience blending my love of like metal and symphonic music and folklore.
For the characters in the show, did you create a signature sound for each of them, like a little theme, or I haven't had enough episodes to tease that out myself, but are they going to have their own basic themes, kind of like in Star Wars? Rey has her own theme, and Leia and Han have their own theme, that kind of thing.
We do and we don't, and that was something that we played with quite a bit, because each of the characters kind of has their episode where we kind of learn more about them over time, and as we learn more about them, little melodic ideas begin to mold. And one of the characters that we felt was the hardest to do that with was actually our main character, Luke, because Luke is such a deep character. We didn't know exactly what musical language works with him. So he has a couple themes. One that kind of represents his tapping into the other world, like his ghost kind of reaching out a motif, and that's also the main theme of the show that kind of goes da 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 da, and so you hear that all over the place. And we tried using it as his theme in general, and noticed that it just wasn't working for some of the more like the more emotional moments. And so I wrote what's two other themes, one which I call like Luke's purpose, which is like his reason for why he's doing what he's doing, and then another one which is takes that same like musical language and sort of twists it a little bit, called Luke's failures, which is all of his sort of his like his own personal demons, and sort of how would those be affecting why he's doing what he's doing, how are those affecting his relationships. And so Luke has about a bunch of different themes, and then we go to a character like Susan, and she has one theme which represents her relationship with herself, with her mom, with her dad. And then she has a theme which represents her supernatural powers and what that is, and how those are like opening up, and how she's slowly becoming more confident within them, learning to embrace them versus be frightened of them. And so both of those two melodies, they come intertwined every now and then, but sometimes we need to focus more on her powers, and we need to focus more on her emotional journey. And the other characters also have melodies that will slowly evolve, and I can't talk about them right now, but each character does have a theme, but we will slowly kind of like learn them and listen to them as they come. But it was a very early on decision that we made to not introduce these melodies too early, because we knew that we might get lost in like in over indulgence in themes. And so instead we started to focus more on conceptual themes, and then have these characters become one with the music as we learn more about them.
And I was going to ask you also, so when you get a project like Surreal Estate or I think it's Blackwater, right? Where in the process of the filming do you begin your composing? Like, do you work with the directors and the writers first, and then you start coming with the themes? Do they film things and then you watch it, and that's when you start composing?
That's a great question, because it kind of changes every single project. On Blackwater, I came in very late. They had unfortunately had to replace their last composer, and they were in a bit of a rush. But I knew someone that was working on the post-production side, and he was like, "This guy Spencer's really good. You should give him a shot." And I pitched with like a metal meets a Jerry Goldsmith, kind of like, what if Jerry Goldsmith and Meshuggah kind of both played the same music, and they loved that. But that was a 6-week turnaround, basically jumping in right away. So we talked a lot about like how much music was needed, where do we want to take the musical direction. How much orchestra are we leaning in on versus how much are we going to lean more into the metal, and what is the the subtext that we want to pull out. And that was very different from Real Estate, where I came in before they were even filming. Like I was brought in very early on because we needed music for one episode involving a music box, and we needed another piece that involved a ghostly trap song, and both of those had to play on set. So I was brought in, I think, almost 2 months before they even went to camera, hoping that I didn't mess up between then and post. But because of that, it's allowed me to speak with George the entire way about like what are these characters, like where are we taking them. I was allowed to read scripts and just begin writing based on dailies, and that was pretty incredible because that rarely happens. Like it's one of the few times that I've ever had it happen. And even speaking with my colleagues, like, we're often the last in the line, and we're often brought in more closer to what it was like on Blackwater, and we're almost playing catch up. But on this one, it was like I was part of the team almost from what I felt like day one. And I'm very thankful for that, because I think we've all made really nice relationships and kind of made our own a family almost in a way.
So how is it different when you're composing for a series like Surreal Estate versus a film like Blackwater, or a video game? You worked on Tom Clancy's Shadowbreak, which is a first-person shooter game. So where do you get your mindset do you have to get into to do all those three different types of composing?
It's I'm a very linear composer in the sense of everything tends to always go this way, and even if there's callbacks, things are usually prepped and set up. Like I tend to, when I'm writing for a film, make like what I call like my map, like my thematic map. It's sort of like I figure out what all the major themes are, what are we going to be using from Act 5, how is Act 1 going to sort of prep that. And then kind of after the map is more or less completed, kind of start writing each of those motifs and then start placing them around to make sure that everything's working. On TV, it's similar to that, but you don't always know where you're going to go for later episodes. I knew about half of the season before I began writing a lot of material, but I didn't know the second half yet. So it was sort of hoping that I knew where things were going and talking with George about where these characters are going. Like, is this the right plan? Is this the right sort of musical motif? And then adjusting from there, like as needed. However, video games are different because video games are so much based on where the player is going to be in, and a lot of that music is, I call it almost like non-linear, where it has to move any second depending on where the character's at, and that's a very different experience for someone who's like he's used to, like me, planning everything and being like, this is Act 1, this is like all these motifs will come over into Act 5. But thankfully, my roommate in college was still is a video game composer, so I was able to basically be like, teach me everything that this is not my world, but help me make this happen. And he was great, and I learned a lot from working on a video game and how to make music adaptable at any moment. And it's a lot of almost creating atmospheres that can come like in and out, and rhythms that don't need to be beholden to a single moment. And it's very different, and I would love to do it again, because it's one of those things where it's like when you are limited by certain aspects, you write music that you never expect, and that's kind of one of those moments of like, I didn't expect to write music like that, but because of the limitation, it sort of makes you freer.
And for my last question, That just flew right out of my head because I just thought of it while we were talking.
Sorry.
It's not your fault. Oh, what is it about music that you love the most? And when you're composing, what gets you the most excited when you're creating?
You're asking the best questions. I love all of these. I don't know how to answer like half of them. I gotta think for a second. I don't know. It's like one of those. I think when I'm writing music, I just love seeing the story come to life, and I love feeling like I'm part of the team. There's something about like when you know it's right, you know, okay, this is going to work, and when you know that and you play the first couple pieces to your director, and they get so like excited, and it's kind of what I remember about wanting to be a filmmaker from the first place. Like I remember watching the old. There's a great a documentary, a series on how they made the Lord of the Rings movies. And I remember watching those when I was like 10, thinking like, oh, I want to be like kind of like a part of that. And working in TV and working in film kind of establishes that love of, yeah, this is why I went into this, because it's just when you're writing something and you know that it's right, and you know that it's kind of feeling like it's part of the world that's been filmed and it's been acted to, and then you play it for your director and they also go, yeah, this is right. That's a great feeling of like, okay, we're doing this together and we're going to keep on rocking. And then when it's not right, there's something I'm one of the few guys that doesn't mind doing notes, because I know that like it can only be better. So it's like if I didn't nail it, like how can we improve it? Like what can we do to kind of make it match a vision? And having a director that's really good about vocalizing that, and really good who just understands what they want in a articulate way, helps you to figure out why you maybe missed it. And what I love so much about working on any movie, and I've done a lot of movies. I think I'm very blessed that I've been able to work on as many projects, which I have, and every single one of them, I've learned something a little bit different about how people think and how to empathize with people. And there's something about that, and working on all these different types of movies, that's really been rewarding, and like learning about just how many unique minds there are in this world. And you learn a little bit different. You learn something a bit different about how you think and how you approach creativity. And I can't get that doing just filmmaking or just music. It only seems to come when I'm doing music for film. I think that's why I transitioned into this at the age that I did, because I knew that writing and directing wasn't where my personality fit, but it does fit here because it's part of the process, it's part of the collaboration, but you can still add something to the story if you're both on the same wavelength.
Actually, I remembered the question. It was, okay. What is the importance of music to filmed media? Like, why is it important that we have the music as part of the filmed experience?
I feel like I almost feel two ways about it. The first is that it's sort of how I approach music in general, which is I feel like there's always something in a story that music can latch onto, that without it, you almost miss that. Like even talking about Star Wars, like that's an opera. And without John Williams' music, I feel like the opera-ness is lost. I feel like you don't totally feel the weight and the grandiosity in the way that is similar to Wagner's opera. And even in it's a bit of a out there one, but I was thinking the other day about how the Crown, Martin Phipps's music for that tells you that this is a Greek tragedy. And I think without that music, you wouldn't totally get that the same way. I think you'd see a bunch of rich people being rich, but I don't think you totally would get a tragedy that comes with that level of power in the same way that it did with Aristophanes and all of those old Greek plays. So I find music in many movies can kind of lift us out of reality and into the escapism that we all kind of want. And the other thing is I just feel like people want it. Like I keep thinking about all the movies that I've seen where there's no music, and audiences do feel a bit disconnected, or they almost feel like I liked it, but I felt tense. So I don't know if I totally had to do it. Like I'm in with it. But then you add even just a sprinkle of music, and suddenly we feel a closer connection to the characters. I don't know why that is. It's something about our brains and watching something. It's almost like we can't not have music. But even in old Greek plays, they had music playing in the background. There's something about you see characters talking, and you just want to have a bit like a little bit of music underneath it to help connect us with them. Almost like without it, it's what's that called? When you see a robot, and it's really lifelike. But
Uncanny Valley.
It's like the Uncanny Valley. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's sort of how I feel about it. It's almost like we need music, but to just have music isn't enough. The music has to bring something else that is within the story, but isn't felt unless the music is doing that.
I know I'm a big horror fan, film nerd, and music is so incredibly important. And dropping the silences as well is important, because you have to know when to let it sit a little to build that tension.
You are absolutely right. That's actually something that we talked about a lot in real estate, was how do we play with silence but still allow the music to exist. And we talked a lot about almost avoiding a lot of the like rising sounds and like the usual kind of things, because we just knew that like we have a lot of music in the show anyway. Like let's let those moments be the moments where there's almost no music. That way when we need the more like emotional music, that can exist there, but like let the horror almost exist musicless, and let it just exist, and like let us just sit in that world of tension, and like let the monster almost like evolve around us, and the music is doing very, very little in those moments. And I think that, based on the comments that we've been seeing so far, which seems to be working. But you're absolutely right. Like it's just having no music is just as integral as having music, and it's finding that balance between how much do we write and how much do we not write is very challenging. But it's when we get it right, it works.
I would say the classic example of that is the shower scene in Psycho, where everything goes dead silent before the actual event happens, and then that Bernard Herrmann score comes in and just like slices you like a knife. So
absolutely, it's just it's haunting. And even more recently, like the stuff that's coming out of A24.
Oh yeah,
or it's just like mind blowing how they use music in those things. Like they just wait and then they give you like the most epic piece of music that just frightens you. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, they have some great scores in those films, I think.
Agreed.
So I just want to say thank you so much for talking with us. It was really nice to meet you. You're up in Canada, right?
I am, yeah.
And if anyone wants to know more about you, they would go to spencercreaghan.com.
Yeah, that would be the place. And I'm also on Twitter, and weekly we talk about the music, and we talk about each episode and sort of what's going on and everything like that. So people are welcome to follow me there at Spencer Composer.
Spencer Composer, great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.